share.
Thank you, Louise. Hello, everyone, and welcome to OTF Connect. Good to have new people here tonight, and thank you for giving of your own time to join us tonight. I know how valuable your time is, so we really appreciate it that you're here. It's my pleasure to welcome Aviva Dunziger, who will be facilitating tonight's webinar on Here's My Classroom, welcoming us into her kindergarten classroom. Aviva has facilitated numerous OTF Connect sessions for us over the last 2 years, and she really does bring a wealth of experience to share with us at every session that she facilitates. So welcome, Aviva.
Thanks, Syria, and thanks everybody else for coming tonight. I teach grade 1 right now, but this presentation is going to include some information from my grade 1 classroom, but also from last year when I taught grade 5, as well as bits and pieces of how the classroom environment could change as you do prep coverage and possibly work with students in other grades as well. This is my 14th year teaching, and I've taught 12 of those years that's okay, Syria. I taught 12 of those years in primary, in kindergarten really to grade 2. Then I taught grade 6 for a year, grade 5 for a year, and I did some prep coverage and stuff during those times as well. So I basically offered prep for everything from grade 1 to grade 6. So basically did a little bit of everything, and now I'm back to teaching grade 1 this year at a different school with a different environment and a different group of students, and my environment has continued to change too based on those student needs. So this presentation tonight is going to include a little bit of everything from there. I really want this presentation to be about you and giving you, first of all, the information that you want, but also giving you a chance to share your information, the kinds of things that you do in your classroom as well, because one of the things that I am hoping is going to come across as part of this presentation is the fact that so much of what I do in the classroom has been inspired by other educators, ones that I work with and learn from every day at the school, as well as ones that I work with and learn from online. And so I'm hoping that we'll be able to share some of our ideas here and the different things that you do, as well as any questions and things that you have. Please continue to put them in the chat box in addition to the times that I have kind of the text box options for you to add, so that we can kind of continue to learn from each other and continue to kind of ask those hard questions to kind of push our own thinking forward. So with that, I guess we'll get started. And here's my classroom. At the bottom here, you'll see that I do have some information with my Twitter handle, Aviva Loca, and I do tweet quite frequently. So if you have any questions or want to connect, if I'm not already connecting with you, please feel free to add it from there. My blog, where I also do blog quite regularly as well. This is my professional blog. I do have a classroom one as well, and as well as my email address. And that's just my personal one, but you can always email me. I will get back to you too. My class blog I will add into the chat window as well, but it does show up on some other slides. So hopefully I've managed to put it in correctly as I'm talking and typing, but it does show up on some other slides too. So just to begin, we're looking at using the polling tool that Louise had spoken about before, and I'm just trying to get a feel for where everyone's at in the room. So if you could use the A, B, or C polling tool, and just let us know if you're in primary, junior, or intermediate, or if you don't actually fall into one of those categories. If you want to just write something in the chat window as well and let us know where you're at, that would be great. Thanks, Danielle. Awesome. Thanks, Angie. Perfect. Okay. Oh, awesome. Okay, so I think basically everyone's answered at this point. So it looks like we kind of have a mix of everyone from primary to junior to intermediate. So what you'll hopefully see on the advancing slides is I did try to give examples from the different grades and different positions I've been in as well. But if anyone who's teaching in a different division is looking for some more specific information, I'm also happy to share the names of some people that I follow on Twitter, as well as some educators at the school where I teach too, that might be able to help you out and just exchange some information if you're not seeing what you're looking for. Okay, so to begin, we kind of have a video explanation for the grade 1 classroom setup. And so what I'd really love for everybody to do is there's a YouTube link at the bottom, which I'm hoping Louise can put into the chat window. And I'd love for everyone to get a chance to go and listen to this. It is about a 6-minute long video. And I know that that can be a little bit long, but it kind of explains the setup of grade 1, and all the other slides will talk a little bit more about it. So if everyone can click on that link, it should open in your internet browser, and then come back and just maybe put a message in the chat box after you've had a chance to look at it. That would be great. All right. Louise, I don't know if there's anything you can do now, but I just realized as this is going, even though I looked at the slides from before, I think that this is our older version of the presentation, and not the newer version, and it was just the order of the slides. If it's going to be problematic, what I can do is just kind of fast forward and then go back, because my question slides are at a different spot.
Not a problem, Aziza. Let me just go and get the updated one. I must have clicked one below where I should have. I'll get that in there. So is the very next slide the wrong one?
Well, it's just that the problem is I switched my questioning slides, which which I didn't realize when I was looking through, but I did because I thought I actually had a questioning slide first, and so as people are watching this, I pulled up the older or the newer version of the presentation on my computer, and I realized the issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's just the questioning slides.
Yeah.
And
I actually
so
added in a couple extra, but it's not that problematic. I'm more concerned about that the questioning slide, I think, move its way forward.
exactly.
So what I can
So
do.
I've just put the questioning slide exactly after the video slide. Let me just move back for you.
Okay.
So if you're going to work on that one, then I am going to get the correct slides loaded in there right after. And I'm so sorry, folks, we're talking over your video.
Okay. Sorry. Thanks, Tab. Maybe as people are finishing, they'd like to grab the text tool, because hopefully people, if they haven't finished watching the video, are towards the end of it now. If you want to grab the little text tool and you want to start adding to the slide here, now that you've had a chance to both see the video and think about your own experiences, maybe you can start to write about how do you arrange your environment to be responsive to student needs. So any ideas that you have about your actual classroom arrangement, if you'd like to grab the text tool and add some of them into the text box, that would be great. Oh, I like the picture idea. a great one.
Sorry, Aviva, yes. If you're able to, our email server is down and I can't access anything right now. If you could go up to load content and then just browse and find your presentation, it should be in there. And it'll take a moment to load while people are working on this. Sure. Thanks. Or you can email it to my Gmail, whatever's easier for you.
No, I should be able to get it from here, so no problem. I have to find what I called it. Okay. And Louise, I am actually uploading this now, so hopefully it'll work. And, well, I like the idea of getting students to create their own labels for the manipulative. That actually came out to me as a suggestion of a way to kind of practice printing skills in a meaningful context. So getting students to write labels is a nice way for them to do printing, but to actually do the printing in some way that has meaning versus maybe just the black line masters and the printing sheets and stuff. So I really like that. Oh, I love the idea of the store. What a great one. For the person who wrote about the store, has anyone ever made like signs and stuff for the store for the materials in it, or is it different? I just love to hear a little more about it.
We just set it up once, and the kids said it's like a store. Whenever we miss we're needing something, we go and get it. So they just talked about it like that. We didn't do anything, didn't explore it.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. So now I have this in, Louise, and I think I'm on like about page 400 here. Hold on.
Yeah, these look a little confusing for a minute while you get in there.
Okay. I think what happened is, what I'll do is I'll let people still add to the page that we should be on. Because I think we went, yeah. Because now I probably just lost what everyone's just done, right?
No, nope. It's going to still be there, and so I'm going to go and remove all the stuff that you don't need to have.
Okay. Okay. Because if everyone sees me, I don't know if, I'm assuming everyone can see all this flipping that I'm now constantly doing. I just don't know where their stuff is.
How's that? Oops, hang on a second. Wrong one.
Oh, perfect. Yep. That's awesome. Thank you.
Okay. No, thank you.
Okay. So, unless the carpet for discussion, I like that part too. It's really interesting to see the different things that people do here to both make the students feel welcome in the classroom, but also have more control over the classroom, as well as the actual setup themselves. So I just like even, and seeing some of the overlapping pieces, I think, between the primary and junior classrooms as well as the intermediate. So seeing that, you know, your intermediate math class still has, you know, inquiry tables and a conferencing table and manipulatives and things around, which would be in so many of the primary classrooms as well, but just at a different age and in a different locations and things like that. So it's really neat to see the overlap that's there. So I am going to move on to the next slide, but if there's more ideas, I know some people have been using the chat box area as well. Please feel free to keep adding them in there or keep adding them as the slides are going too. Okay. So now we're looking a little bit at physical space. So I'm just going to share, this is examples of what I've currently done with the grade 1 classroom. And I keep on kind of playing around with the areas too, which I guess goes a little bit later and will be discussed with that whole concept of the environment as the third teacher. And that how our environment continues to change to meet those different needs of students. So in this case, the physical space, I first start with the fact that I happen to be lucky and I have these two huge windows that overlook into our playground area out back. And they slide across, so I can slide them to cover them up, but I can also slide them open. So I've tried to get some plants and things that can sit by the windows to even get with our grade 1 curriculum idea of living things. It's like we're constantly exploring the concept of living things with the use of those plants and with the use of some resources that are out there. And then I kind of change around what's on the tables in front. So in this case, we were kind of looking at a provocation on music. So I filled up some glass jars with different amounts of water and then put some different instruments that could be used to hit the glass jars near them, and kind of got students starting to think about how the sounds might change. And then I put some markers down with some books for writing, and again got them thinking about the fact on, oh, well, if I were going to write some kind of instructions for playing music or even create a song, how could I use the markers that are there with the books that are there, and as well as the glass jars that are out there, to kind of help share with others how to create that song. And this whole idea actually came from our arts consultant, and the way that the light kind of shines on the glass jars and with the music and stuff kind of sitting apart from everything else, it's kind of given students an opportunity to really go over there and explore that concept, but kind of away from where other quieter areas in the room may be, in an area where they're kind of drawn to it because of the light. And I think that that's where the window piece really kind of comes into play. Also, the ideas of flexible seating. So in the classroom, I don't have any desks. I do have 3 big round tables, as well as a guided reading table, a little table that kind of sits off into the corner that we use kind of as a nature table, as well as those 2 big tables by the window. And I also have a little tiny table that sits in my book area as well, that even students at lunchtime like to sit to kind of have almost like a little picnic area away from everyone else. It's a little bit quieter, it's off to the side, and some students like to even go and work there on their own if they're looking for a quieter area too. And the idea is nobody really has an assigned spot to sit, so they move themselves around based on their needs at the time, based on if they want to work as part of a bigger group, as part of a smaller group, or maybe work on their own, and based on the kind of environment that they want. If they want kind of an environment where they can collaborate and talk a little bit more, versus if they may want a quieter one. And this is where we also have the use of the guided reading table. I do run regular guided reading groups. I constantly have a group in front of me, and if I'm not sitting with a group at the guided reading table, I am probably sitting down on the floor with someone else or sitting at a table and with another group of kids somewhere else. But the guided reading table also becomes that area even when I'm not sitting there with a group of kids, where students can sit and lead and work with each other. And this is an example of that. So one of the things that I started this year is that every Friday for the last 20 minutes of the day, I've invited all parents into the classroom to come in and to learn with us. And we do different things in the classroom. Sometimes I get a large number of parents, sometimes I just get 1 or 2, but they always kind of join in one of our learning activities with us. So in this case, this was actually a case where I did have a parent joining with us to do a measurement activity at the end of the day, and she had come in, and this small group had decided with the mom to go off, and they actually did some of their measuring stuff together, and they sat in together to kind of help each other. And having that area where they could kind of face each other, work beside each other, and spread out and collaborate really worked well. And that's why I love that guided reading table, even if it's not being used for guided reading. And then there's the use of floor space. And somebody else in the chat box before mentioned the idea that they really like that carpet for the meeting area. I love it for the meeting area. I also love it for where they can sit and work together. Students seem to love working and learning on the floor. Even though I have access to lots of tables for them, when they're writing, a large number of them are spread out either on the carpet or on the floor area beside it. So having that area where they can work and learn in the environment that works best is great. The carpet piece does help when we are doing something like this, where in this case it was a math challenge and the students were actually creating some beds for different dolls, and they had to figure out the non-standard units and how long they would make it and how it varied depending on the length of the different toys that they were building the beds for. These are louder blocks and things like that. It's nice to have the quieter area of the carpet to suppress some of that noise so it doesn't become too much. And that, speaking of quiet, that quieter area for independent or partner work is great. This is an example of the little table that I was talking about where students really like to go and work either alone or together in a partner group, or also to eat together at lunchtime. And I'll often find that if students are looking for an area where they can work on their own, they tend to go over to it. It has some comfortable seating, and it's kind of confined within the bookshelf area, and so it's a little bit smaller, a little more confined, and it seems to work well for those students that kind of need that quieter area. Then there's also the idea of the outdoor classroom. And I've really explored this more in the last couple of years in terms of how to use that environment piece and get students to be learning outside, not just for the use of going out for recess and running around, but in terms of seeing what's out and around them. And this is highly inspired by a large number of kindergarten teachers that use the outdoor classroom all the time. If you're on Twitter, I would highly suggest following Kinderfine. I'm just going to put that there. She does a ton of stuff with the outdoor classroom. She's from the Peel board, and she really has a whole bunch of different ideas in terms of how to make use of this environment. There's also first grade Lori. She's a grade 1 teacher for our board, and she also has some examples on her blog of how she's taken the class outside and really done a whole bunch of learning from using nature as the starting point, using the outdoor as the starting point. And if you actually look on Lori's blog, which is, Lori's blog, which is on her Twitter page, she's given a bunch of examples from there on how she started with the outdoor classroom idea. Natural Curiosity is a free online book that you can download. You can also purchase it if you want, but you can download it from there. And one of the great things about Natural Curiosity is it does really talk about the use of the environment and bringing that into the inquiry and the learning that's happening within the classroom. So this year, this is an example of one of the things we did. It was actually a really cool day, but we started our Wonder Wednesdays. So the idea of coming up with a whole bunch of wonders and questions that students wanted to explore, and then figuring out how we could start exploring them together. So we thought we would use the environment as inspiration for wondering. And so I gave everybody their wonder books, and then what they did here is they took their wonder books outside, and the idea first was that if we're going to come up with good questions and we're going to come up with good wonders, we first need to really observe and look closely at things. And so the students took out their pencils and their books, and they went to different areas within our playground, and they started to draw and write some ideas down based on what they saw. And it happened to be our first really, really cool day of the year, and a large group of students even found out that they could go and sit under the little structure in our playground, and it blocked out some of the wind, so it was a little bit warmer to write. And so they sat down and they wrote and talked together under there, and then we brought the ideas in and used that to start brainstorming our questions. So with that in mind, after kind of looking at the idea of this is what the grade 1 classroom environment looks like. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you what I did with the grade 5, but also how I changed the classroom throughout the year. And even the grade 1 one, I've made some changes to since the year started. So what I'd love to know from you is what are some different ways that you've changed your classroom environment throughout the school year? And if you haven't made changes yet, maybe you can speak about some that you've done in previous years, and maybe even explain why you made some of the changes that you did. So if you just want to grab the text tool, or if you want to put some ideas into the chat box.
While people who were here at the beginning of the session get started with that, those of you that just recently logged in, apologize if you had any difficulties with the link. Our email server was not cooperating with us today. But at the left-hand side of the whiteboard space, you'll find a tool strip, and the fourth tool from the top is the text tool. You can just grab that. There's actually two text tool options if you click on the little triangle in the corner, and then you can just click on the whiteboard and start typing. If you have any trouble, just add it to the chat.
I'm just kind of getting caught up on the chat box now. Dorothy, thank you for mentioning Kelly Hughes too. It's funny, I was actually looking at a bunch of her tweets today as well, and she is a great person to follow and kind of look around in terms of what she does as well. So thank you for mentioning that. For the person who said that they wish they had more room for centers and they have 31 desks for their largest class, this is actually something I'm going to address in the next little bit of slides. But I guess I would ask, do all students need their own desk? Yeah, the wall. I'd love to hear more about the provocation table too. I know Natalie had done it. Is it something that you switch up every week with like different provocations, or is it something that's kind of student generated by things that follow their interests?
Right now, my provocation table, I'll be talking about the water cycle. So I'm probably going to put ice on the table coming from outside and ask them what it's going to happen to it during the day. So it's more objects that I bring so I could provoke questions out of the kids.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, I know the person who had put down about the 31 desks, I know that kind of moves around, and I know you said that you had kind of asked yourself that same question. It was actually another teacher that asked me that question at the beginning of last year when I was starting to teach grade 5, and I had read a lot about using inquiry as part of the classroom, and you know, having these big places within the room where students could work, having a spot for the inquiry circles, and not really knowing exactly how I was going to do that when I also had 31 students in my class. So I didn't really know how I was going to have enough room in what was a much smaller classroom for it, and I had brought with me a sofa that I wanted to bring into the room, as well as some beanbag chairs and another little chair. And I thought, I'm not really sure on how I'm going to get everything in this small classroom with the desk and still have space for the students to learn. And so that's when I started to play around with some initial changes and then kind of play throughout the year with some additional changes as well, both of which will be kind of addressed in some of these other slides with grade 5. Now I'm just kind of reading I'm just kind of reading around right now on some of the different things that people have done. How someone said here that they put the desk next to the walls and things like that. There are kind of other ways to play around with the amount of room. Certainly space always seems to be one of the biggest issues, and I do find depending on the school that you're at, it does make it a little bit harder sometimes to have, I guess, that big enough room. And, you know, I have a really good friend who teaches grade 8, and she has 35 students right now. And yes, 35 desks in a classroom are going to basically go wall to wall. So it does kind of take some people maybe to ask those questions on how we can kind of vary that classroom room arrangement to make the most, especially if we want to have some of the areas for other people to work. I love the idea of changing arrangements based on student interest and using the groups as centers. Those are things I've played with before as well, right? Just because the desk maybe initially belongs to them doesn't mean that they're the only ones who need to sit at the desk. Small groups. I think that floor space is so important. It's something I think that seems to disappear. I found more when I went up to the junior grades versus down in primary. In primary, we see all the classrooms that either have a carpet or if not a carpet, a big empty floor space to work at. And then all of a sudden we go up to the junior and intermediate grades and we seem to lose both of those. So it's nice to kind of think of ways that we can keep them even as we move up, because I do think the students still need that space. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, kind of being cognizant of time and stuff as well. But if other people have ideas, please feel free to keep adding them in the chat box too. Okay. So with that, we have a little more discussion. So I guess, and some of this came out in the last bit of slides, so I won't take too long on this, but it is something I'd love for people to think a bit about, is what are some of the factors that guide your decisions on when or how to change your classroom environment? What are some of the things that you think about? And I know that the idea of student interest kind of came up. I'm just wondering if there's anything else from there. So if people want to just take a couple of minutes and add a few ideas in here, then we can move on to sharing some ideas as well. So just ideas for sure. So the people that said the subject matter, I'm just interested in knowing what subjects, like what subjects you would think you would need certain environments versus others. I don't know if anyone can expand on that. It may be easier in the chat box than it is on here, but I'm just curious. Just material. Oh yeah, or grabbing the mic would be awesome. The special needs part is one that I addressed in some of the slides too, because especially last year when I taught grade 5, it was the piece that really stopped me initially from figuring out how to both arrange and change classrooms, because I taught 2 students who had autism. So I was always kind of cognizant of their needs, and I wasn't so sure that all the decisions that I had would work well. So I had to play around with how to make that work. And so I do think that special needs piece is one that we need to look at and consider, because all of us seem to have students with a variety of needs in our classrooms too. Okay. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, but again, if there are more ideas, feel free to add them in the box in the chat window, or if you want to grab a mic and share some out loud, just let me know and we can certainly do that too. Okay, so this was the idea of physical space for grade 5. And I'm going to show you what I did initially and then talk a little bit about the change that we ended up making. So I'm going to let everybody, and I'm hoping that we can throw this link again into the window. This is a much shorter video. It's less than 3 minutes. It is one I posted on our grade 5 class blog just before school started so that parents could see it too, to kind of explain that initial classroom arrangement, which then got changed a bit as students came in. So if everyone would like to click on that link and just take a couple minutes to watch the video and then maybe come back and add a happy face or something into the chat window just to let me know you're done, that would be great. And I should say there's always a purpose one has the video in there, but it is a blog post too. And Jim, not sure what you mean by the My Project one. Hopefully you found that if you click on that Always a Purpose link, it will take you to a blog post, but that blog post has the video embedded in it. Oh yes, and it is. Now I get what you mean by My Project, and yes, it is My Project. Oh, perfect. Thanks, Eva. Hopefully people are just kind of finishing off. I'll just throw manipulatives. The manipulatives were all actually on that little cart that you can kind of see in the corner of the video. So what I did is I had little buckets on the cart, and they were actually, the buckets were kind of organized according to strands, so areas where the students would most likely use them. And then there was a shelf right beside that had some bigger manipulatives as well. So they were kind of spread out between those two so that students could always just go grab what they needed from either one of the math shelves or from the math cart. Okay. So I'm hoping I kind of like the idea that that people could just go, the students could go and just get what they needed when they needed it, instead of me kind of putting it on the tables for them. If certain students, I found it harder that that they would, you know, be going and getting something that they maybe couldn't choose the right kinds of manipulatives, then I would get them little buckets of what they needed, but overall I didn't find it to be a problem. No, I actually didn't find any problems with them sharing the desk space. The funny thing was, is all year long, they loved the fact that they had room in the classroom. But there was always kind of that thought of, oh, I think I might like my own desk. And then what happened is at the end of the year, I was moving schools, and another teacher in the school was moving into our classroom. So on the second last day of school, all of her desks for the year came down into my classroom because my desk needed to get moved into another room. And we had on the last day of school like 35 desks in the room. My students were freaking out because they were not used to having such limited space when you put all those desks in. And right away it was like this whole thought of, oh my gosh, now I so wish I could go back to having fewer desks. I'd rather share and have more space than have this, because they really struggled with the idea that there was such limited space when they put all the desks in. I think, you know, we talk a lot about learning skills and them being, you know, responsible, collaborating with others, and organizing their stuff, and this kind of forced all of that to happen. We did spend a little bit of time at the beginning of the year with them kind of brainstorming how are they going to share that space, and everything was just kind of temporary. A lot of the stuff went into their lockers afterwards. I did get some bins where they could put their books and stuff on the shelves. Some students kept a few things like a binder in their desk. That was okay. They kind of organized it that way. We kind of worked with, initially I didn't want anything to stay in the room, and then things kind of changed as time went on, but there was very little. The 6 students at the guided reading table actually shared one little bin where they just put their do-it-hanger binder and a pencil case, and everything at the end of the day went back into their locker. The students that shared these desks that you can kind of see in the image here, they would sometimes leave their binder or whatever inside the desk and a pencil case, and then they would get the rest with them. If you don't have other storage, like a locker, you could set up bins. I mean, I did have areas in both a storage cupboard that I had and even on the top of the shelves where you could have set a few little buckets where they could have put their stuff there, or possibly even put a bucket between the desks where each student could then put something like a binder and a pencil case to stay there. So it does kind of minimize. I did have a lot of students as the year went on. They were allowed to bring their own devices with them. A lot of them brought their own iPads or iPods. And so, to be honest, a lot of them did the majority of the work on a device, maybe even a computer, and they were bringing fewer things with them. So you might be bringing a pencil case, but that was kind of it. And as I said, they really liked the idea of the flexible seating and the larger amount of room in the classroom. Students need room, and I don't even think they realize how much they need it until they don't have it. So with all of that being said, and as much as we kind of liked this, we did actually change the design as time went on. In grade 5, one of the things we did for science is we did the human body, and the students each created their own organ systems, and then we had a big body bonanza where a bunch of different classes were invited in to come and see how the organ systems work that the students designed, and hear about them and ask them questions. And I mean, this was a huge part for us. They even designed musical pieces to go with each of their organ systems that they thought would align. The music teacher did it with them. They used the elements of design in creating their organ system as well. So there was an art tie-in. They did a bunch of writing with it. So there was also like a writing tie-in and research. And we were inviting these classes in, so there was also an oral language and sharing time with it. And one of the things that we were going to do is we were going to create we were going to create like pathways from the heart out to each of the system displays that we had. And basically what happened is we actually turned our entire classroom into the human body. The students decided how that was going to work. So they redid all the different bulletin boards. They created some different designs for it. They added images. It was like one big media work. And they used like hockey tape on the floor with veins to create this heart that then led out to the different organ systems. And we even had a beating heart on the smartboard for when people came in. And when we did this, because we were creating our bulletin board display for this human body bonanza, and we were doing the floor one, we had moved all the desks kind of along the outside of the room. And what happened is we had kept it for a little bit of time as that happened, and students started to really like the fact that the desks were not kind of in the middle, but they had more space. They loved using the floor space, and they found that they were just kind of pulling the desks in as they needed them. So it didn't really matter where they were keeping their things. They could always find where their stuff was, but they just, if they needed to work in a group of 4, they created a group of 4. If they wanted a group of 6, they created a group of 6. Or if they wanted to just pull up a beanbag and sit on the floor, they pulled up a beanbag and sat on the floor. So they could kind of create the classroom that worked for them at the time when it worked for them. And so what we did is afterwards we looked at changing the design. And I asked the students what they thought of the idea of basically leaving a similar design. Now we did pull the desks in a little bit. As you can see, they're kind of sitting right in front of the smartboard. We did pull them in a bit so they weren't right in front, and kind of gave a little bit of a path and basically created a row along the front and a row along the back. And then one student or a couple students really wanted a desk on their own off to the side, like just them and their partners, so they did that. That really worked well for them. I had a few students with autism, and this is one of the things that also comes up in a later slide, but what happened is their desk area remained the same. So even though the other students moved their stuff around, theirs stayed in the same place, their area remained the same, and that helped keep the consistency for them. So this blog post that's linked here, that I'm sure Louise will put in the chat room box and stuff as well, is kind of talks about that change in design and the reason behind that change in design. And again, one of the things that opened up was the use of floor for teaching. And so in this case, you'll see we have kind of the caution tape here. And what happened, we were looking at how natural phenomena can impact on structures. And so my student teacher at the time actually set this up, and she basically set up a provocation for the beginning of the unit by creating this little disaster that she put in the middle of the floor. And the students came in and they were all very excited. There's caution tape, there's this thing happening in the middle, and they started to talk right away about what might have happened. And they started to make some predictions. Some thought that it was a tornado. They explained why they thought it was. Some people thought that it was an earthquake. They explained why. And there was all kinds of such like rich dialogue about these different natural phenomena, as well as some questions and things that came up. And then they started to have a game of challenge. And challenge is something that my previous vice principal, Christy Curie-Bishop, taught our class. And basically the way that it works is that students can only question each other. So in this case, people were feeling differently about it. So some might have said, oh my gosh, I really think this is an earthquake. Somebody else may have said, oh my gosh, I really think this is a tornado. And so they're explaining why the people that disagree with them could only come back at each other with questions. And the questions started to poke holes in their reasoning. And then from there, they were able to kind of come up with kind of narrowing down what they thought had actually caused this disaster and why. On the right-hand side, you're going to see what kind of an outline of hockey tape with a 4 and a 16 in it. And it was actually a provocation that was used for math as we were talking about flip, slides, turns, and we were using it with the concept of my parking, because I had made a comment, I'm a horrible parker, and I usually tweet in the morning about my lack of being able to get into my parking space. And the students all used to find that very funny, that I could not seem to get into the parking space no matter what I tried to do. But one of the things that came up here is that I set this up on the floor, and I talked about all the problems that I had getting into my spot in the morning, and the students started to give me directions on how I could have gone into my spot, which at the time was number 4. And they had to use the directional language in order to get me into the spot. And so they started to get the idea of working as part of kind of like a grid and how many spots down. And because we had the bigger area, they could pull chairs around the outside, and we could actually work as part of that floor area, which wouldn't have happened if, because of our 31 students, if we had had the row-to-row desks. And they can also use the floor for learning, and you can see that here. And I think in this case, it's both the floor that happens inside the classroom, which is on the right, as well as the one outside the classroom in the hallway. I often had students that were kind of working just outside our room in the hallway here. This one, they were working on a point of view thing for social studies. In the other case, we were working in science on energy conservation, and I actually got some kits, and they were reading the instructions in order to create the house that would help conserve energy. And having enough physical spot in the room to lay out and work together really helped. Because then they could find a spot that they were comfortable in and a spot where they could really collaborate. And there's seating with different options. So in this case, there's seating for the partners. So people that wanted to work in twos, they would take the one set of desks, and they could either work beside or across from each other in order to do that work together. There's also seating available for those small groups. If they want bigger areas, they could do that. So as they were building different bridges here for our bridge test in science, they were able to have a larger area to work together. And they either had like the 2 desks beside each other and kind of had the 4 people working, or they had the guided reading table where they may have had, say, 6 people working, and there were all kinds of different options for them. And they even had seating for larger groups. So as they were collaborating in larger group options, in this case, we were still working on that geometry concept of like flips, slides, turns, and we had the idea here that the students were actually demonstrating their knowledge of sum through Minecraft. And they were working as part of a larger group, so they could have the 3 or 4 tables together in order to do so. So they could actually arrange the classroom in the way that worked best for them. It's also nice, if possible, to have these use of shared spaces. In this case last year, and I'm lucky enough this year as well because I'm in a newer school as well, we do have pods that connect the classes. So basically, my classroom door opens up into this year a grade 1 pod. Last year it opened up into a grade 5 pod, which were about 3 classes that share the area together. Last year's area had some computers along the side and a bunch of tables in the middle. So students could work out there together. Yes, they have to take responsibility. They need to clean up the messes that they have. They need to be cognizant that there's other classes working, so their voice and volume needs to be lower. And that's all kind of the responsibility that you can help teach the students at the time. But that being said, they do have those extra areas to spread out. So as we were doing bigger projects, they were able to spread out. If they really needed a quiet area, and sometimes when you're collaborating as part of louder groups, it's really hard, you can have an area that is that much quieter because it is removed from the bigger group of people. And even the use of the guided reading table. And again, you can have the guided reading table for all kinds of different group options. It's not always just for reading, but it is often for a guided group. This was my student teacher, who you can see in both of these pictures, but she had different groups. She had one group over on the left-hand side, which was a writing group, and she had pulled a group of students that were working on writing their speech as part of social studies for their government presentation, and she actually had them sitting together and they were sharing ideas there. On the right-hand side, she had a group of people that were reading an article and sharing ideas, and it was also connected to a social studies issue, but it was more of a reading task with sharing ideas as part of the full group. And again, she had a group of people sitting down there together. And that flexible seating. And I think that is the reason that the students loved the lack of desks even more, is that it gave them more options for this flexible seating. I always had people sitting together over in the little chairs, the big red chairs, the kind of things that you usually use outside at parties or whatever, the beanbag chairs. They loved that they could kind of move around. For my student that had autism, she really loved the fact that she could sit on a beanbag chair and always kind of have that additional pressure too. And it it really helped in terms of success for the student too. So, and it wasn't like she was the only one. Everybody within the classroom could use that kind of seating that worked best for them. And there can still be outdoor classroom options. Even last year, I take students outside depending on the content that we were exploring. So in this case, we were looking at structures and we were looking at 3D figures and why when building structures you might have different 3D figures in different places, and why construction workers may choose those locations when actually designing different structures. So we had gone outside and they were looking for pictures of different three-dimensional figures, and then we went inside and did some discussion about it, and they worked with the iPads in groups, and they took some photographs of what they saw and had some discussion about why the people that were creating the design, the architect or the construction worker, may have made certain choices with the use of certain three-dimensional figures. And this all ties into this idea of the environment as the third teacher. And thanks, Louise, for putting the resource in there. This is a great one to look at. It's an EduGains website, which, I mean, I love EduGains anyways. It's a capacity building series, which is always some good reading too. But it does talk a lot about that idea. And it's something that I think the full day kindergarten teachers have had a lot of exposure in terms of talking about too. But that with the environment as the third teacher, the classroom environment is something that we're constantly changing to better meet the needs of students, which is really why we're teaching in the first place, is to better meet the needs of students. And it's funny how that environment can have such an impact, I find, especially for our neediest students. So having those various seating options, having the amount of space where they can spread out, having those quieter areas in the classroom, being able to pull the outdoors in, being able to have different grouping options depending on student needs, and being able to change those options throughout the year based on student needs are so important, I think, for all of the students, but especially for our neediest ones. And that kind of leads, I guess, into the final little piece of this, which is what questions, concerns, or problems do you have that may impact on classroom design? So when you're kind of looking at your own classroom setup this year, are there any issues that you foresee that you think may impact on the actual classroom design, either because of the needs of students or because of the physical space? If you could just take the text tool and add in your ideas, it'd be awesome. Trying to imagine how to make it. Do you follow, for the person who just wrote about imagining how to make it work in their smaller portable, do you happen to follow, and I'll write her name in here, Michelle Horst? She's on Twitter. I'm trying to think on what her Twitter name may be, but she does teach in a portable, and she has tweeted, I think, out some pictures in terms of how she's set up her classroom to have a little more of that flexible seating. I know it's definitely harder, but she might be a good one to look at if you don't follow her. I think the mess can certainly be a tricky one, for sure. The least amount of stuff they can leave in there, I think, the better. Thanks, Louise. Okay. Do you have any technology in your school, like that you can have access to? Because I don't even know how much is needed, if there's something there, if it could be worked on as part of a small group or something that students could work on from there. Oh. The one with autism I will definitely be addressing, because last year that was a big issue for me, or one that I was spending a lot of time certainly thinking about. One iPad and 2 computers. Okay, so how many people would you have in your classroom for the person who wrote that they have 1 iPad and 2 computers? Oh, okay. Because I think one of the things I wonder about, and maybe this is where all of this kind of comes into play, if it's with the seating, if it's with the amount of technology, if it's with what the people are doing, is that question of, does everyone need to be doing the same thing at the same time in the same way? So kind of looking at that idea of what are the different options on what students could be doing, so that you could have some students using technology maybe and some students not. Or how might you capture the learning of those people that maybe even aren't using the technology. So right now I'm in a grade 1 class, and yes, I do have a large amount of technology. Most is my own, but I do have some school things that are in there as well. And regardless of that, many of the times those students are not all using that technology. In fact, we use paper and markers and stuff probably just as much, if not more than tech, but the tech does provide a nice way to capture it. So with an iPad, for instance, you could take some photographs, maybe, or videos to help capture. With the computers in the classroom, I wonder if you could have a center or something where people could use it either for research, for blogging, for tweeting, for some kind of way to actually kind of capture that learning that's happening in the classroom. And yeah, tablets certainly do help with it. Okay, so looking a little bit at the time that's going here, I'm going to move on to the next slide as well, but please feel free to keep adding ideas here. I know that some of the questions and issues that have come up here are ones, you're very welcome, are ones that will be addressed in these other slides, so hopefully they'll give you some ideas, but feel free to share some of your own too in the text box if you do have them. Okay, so one of them that came up was with students with special needs, and that's where I would say keep their spot consistent. I had 2 students with autism last year. I was very concerned about moving the classroom environment because I know how important consistency is for students with autism, and I knew how important it was for my 2 particular students. But what I decided to do is, while the rest of the classroom may have moved about them, I didn't change their spots. So their desks remained as their own, their chair remained as their own, and it remained in the same spot. And so what I made sure of is that the other students could continue to kind of move their environment around, but that for the students that need it, it did remain consistent for them. Because that's where I think it comes to that idea that one way may not work for everyone, and so we need to find the way that works for each of those individual students. And that's like the idea of what happens if it gets too loud. So I did have some students where noise was an issue, and when students are collaborating a lot and they're kind of spread out around the classroom, the volume can go up, and that can be problematic. So I use some of those big headphones that control noise, and you can see them in the bucket that's right here. So the students that needed them have them there, and they could put them on to block out some of that noise that they needed in. We also tried to spread out, so the use of that pod area was great. And sometimes it was my other students that might be spreading into the pod or maybe going to work out into the hallway. And sometimes it was the students who found it harder to deal with the noise, then they were the ones going into those quieter areas. Either way, it kind of allowed all the students to kind of meet with that success. And again, that caused the thought of alternative spaces. Here's a small group, yes, they're doing some research and they're doing it right out in the hallway. It gave them that quieter area that they needed. And then came the idea of full class instruction. What are you going to do when the environment looks and sounds so different? So what we did is we often moved ourselves, and you can kind of see it here with the front row kind of sitting up against their desk, and then the other students just moved their chairs into the middle. And so the chairs could move, and then that way the students would be able to learn as part of the full class, or when I was maybe giving a lesson or other students were leading at the front of the room, and then they can move their chairs into small groups working on their own when it was that time afterwards. In the case of prep coverage, we really needed the idea of students getting accustomed to this different setup. So I was offering prep coverage as part of the classroom. I had students moving in and out, and it took them some time to get used to that different setup. I made sure to have a bin where they could store all of their work. They took that bin with them to their classroom when they left. I made sure that everything that came with them left with them so that there wasn't this big mess that was left behind. We ended a few minutes early so that could get organized and they could leave. And I made sure that, thankfully, I had these students at the beginning and kind of the end of the day, so I made sure that things were set up for them so that they weren't walking into this big mess either, because it's important that they also know that they have the environment where they can work too. And the idea of during tests, I did not run a lot of tests. In fact, I think I administered 2 over the course of my entire year in grade 5. But regardless of that, and that's probably another webinar in itself, the idea of being able to spread students out was important so that they could kind of move themselves into an individual area. Some of them may have been working over onto the floor. Some of them we got those folders that could fold out so that students could have their own little individual area to work if that was needed. For a large number of students it wasn't, but if students did find it hard, I made sure to kind of set that up so that they wouldn't have the visual distraction of the other students that were there. And because I just can't deal without at least mentioning it, looking at maybe another option to those tests. So if we do have that environment where maybe everyone doesn't have their own desks and things like that, and we are looking at that collaboration, what are some other options? So we used a lot of things like with sticky notes where they would write some of their ideas. Here in this particular case, I had a bunch of different poems and they were sharing some of their thoughts on the sticky notes. They had their names and I could quickly see what the students already knew just by what they were contributing. It was a good diagnostic. They could share their information in other ways. So in this case, they kind of shared their reflection by what they wrote to me. It didn't need to necessarily be a test, but it was something that they wrote. And then I actually had tweeted out what they wrote, and my previous CP, she actually wrote back a question. So then I gave it to the student, and then the student replied with her question. It comes from my Twitter account, but it is actually her answer. So again, instead of it being a test, it's a nice opportunity to kind of keep building on that learning from the questions that we ask. We can also do a lot of either chalk talks or sharing through our writing through various devices where we are sharing our ideas in different ways. In a chalk talk, people are just writing down their thoughts. Sometimes they might be typing down their thoughts or doing it, writing out a reflection at the end, but some other kind of way to actually share what they've learned, but not necessarily needed in that formalized environment. And then that allows them to work on this independent work within the classroom. So they can work anywhere. They can still work on the floor. That they can, work in the pod or wherever in the hallway, which is the safest way of sharing students' work and pictures with parents. It depended because I did have parents that followed the Twitter account, and if it wasn't something they felt was being marked or needed to remain kind of private, I would tweet out those pictures and did tweet it out. If not, we actually have Google Apps for Ed. Right now, that's what our board has. So the easiest way really is to upload that picture to Google, and then you can just share the link through email. And that's probably the easiest way to do that. I did also have some parents where I would just email them either the link or send it as an attachment as well. Again, it does come down to your own personal thoughts when it comes to emailing, because everyone kind of feels differently on it. If you don't want to go through the email, all of the students in our board also have access to Google Apps, so you could actually just share it to their Google account, and the student could share it with the parents as well. And then you're not going through the concept of emailing, which is a way that people feel differently when it comes to emailing parents. And then we do come up with what if problems arise. And yes, problems probably will arise, but it comes up with the idea of trust. And I would tell my students that all the time. So yes, you're working out in the hallway, and I am trusting that when you're working out there, you're making a good choice. Just like I'm trusting if you're working in the pod, you're making a good choice. I'm going to be walking around, talking and looking all the time. And if I come there and you're not making a good choice, then what you're telling me is that this is not the best place for you. And then it's earning back that trust again. And honestly, it really never became a big issue. So, with all of that said, are there other questions, concerns, or problems that you still have? And what might be some possible solutions to them? And those might be ones that you see what other people have written, or they may be ones where you write some your own thoughts on what a possible solution to your own problems may be. But I would be curious to know if there are some other issues that still exist. Okay, I don't think it's true that if you're doing inquiry, the curriculum can't be finished. I think it is important that we do not look at, we don't look at the curriculum as a checklist. What we are responsible for teaching are the overall expectations. The specific expectations are ones that address the overall. If we give students those overall expectations and ensure that their inquiry questions align with those overall expectations, they will be meeting the specific ones. And instead of it being a checklist, they will actually be coming up with a far better understanding of the content because of the fact that they are delving deeper and asking good questions. I'm going to see if I can find my blog post on the checklist idea, and I can't remember what it's called. Not as curriculum of choice. I'm trying to kind of multitask here to see if I can find it. If not, I will make sure to send it to Louise afterwards. I know it's on here, but it talks about the fact that I do. Oh, here, I want more than the checkbox. Okay, I'm going to throw this link into here, and I think it's a blog post that I wrote in February, and it really came out of my kind of understanding of inquiry and curriculum and overall expectations. And I think that whole concern that we can't meet the expectations if we're using inquiry, which is something that I highly disagree with. And I think it does lead to a deeper understanding, which I think is what someone else has written here. I don't know who it is here because I'm trying to kind of, oh, Syria. Yes, and that does certainly happen. I do think, though, to do that, and I was actually speaking to a student teacher about that not that long ago, is one of the things that you need to know, I think, better than anything else if you're going to use inquiry in the classroom, is you really, really, really need to know the curriculum. You need to understand those overall expectations. You need to know where the curriculum expectations intersect between the strands, between the subject areas, and so that you can help kind of build off of those student interests that also come up and know how you're meeting multiple expectations. So every day in my classroom, at the end of the day, I create a daily shoot blog post where I write about what the students have done during the day, but I also put in brackets at the end the curriculum expectations that have been met. And that is, and I'll throw that link in here, but that is really where you'll see that there are from multiple subject areas and strands and trying to meet all of those expectations to really kind of maximize that time, because if not, you probably won't meet them, but I think you really can. How do you deal with students? Hold on, I can't read the rest of this one. In a collaborative classroom with the interaction between students and with the teachers. Okay, I think that the big thing is that the classroom doesn't always just need to be what happens in the classroom. With the use of technology, you do have a classroom that exists outside of those four walls. So, you know, when my students are away, the parents are going to see those daily shoot blog posts that happen each day, and they can see what the students have learned. The students can see video examples and hear our discussions that have happened in class, and they can extend some of that learning at home. I don't think that you can get rid of the learning that happens within the classroom, but you can also have students partake even from outside. When I taught grade 6 and when I taught grade 5 as well, I would have students that were away at home or even away on vacation, and they would Skype in or they would FaceTime into our class in order to help as part of a group. One of my students in grade 6 actually sat in through a whole lesson. She was in Florida, but we were doing a new lesson in math. She didn't want to miss it, so she FaceTimed in, and then she had the activity to do when she was away in Florida, but she wanted to be able to work as part of the group, so she actually stayed with FaceTime afterwards, and she collaborated from Florida with her group. So there are all kinds of different options that can exist from there too. I do understand the idea of tables versus desks for intermediates. I do think it depends on the size. I know that that's something that kind of comes up with a friend of mine who also teaches intermediate grades as well. I think you have to see what works for you. My only question would be, do they need a one-on-one? So if, you know, is every child always going to be sitting at a desk? And if they're not, then maybe you need the desk because it's taller or whatever and will help with maybe the size of the student, but do they all need their own desk? Or could they maybe share that desk environment and then do some of their learning somewhere else? I know it's hard when the absentees are not the ones who are involved at home, and that's where I think what I would do, and something I've tried to do this year too, I do deal with a lot of absences in my current class as well, is I phone a lot of the parents. I try to find the siblings. Sometimes the parents will pick up other siblings at the end of the day, and I try to stop them so we can talk about what's happening and see if they can come back. I can talk about what they've missed, and we can see if we can try to close some of those gaps. It's not a perfect system, but I don't know if the other way was any more perfect either. I know it's harder when other students are relying on them, and maybe what happens if there is a student that's always away, maybe they can't be part of that group because the other person is relying on them, or maybe they have a role within the group, but the role is a separate one, so the other people are not necessarily relying on them as well. And I do think, for the person who had written down there about being the new teacher and taking the initiative when it comes to inquiry, I know it's hard. I know that if not everybody in the school is doing it, or there's some question about it, I know it's new, and maybe for someone who's new and doing it now, it doesn't seem all that new when you're just starting out. But for others who've maybe done it for a while and are used to doing it one way, it's kind of that lack of control. I know that can be tricky because I know how much I struggled with it, and I don't think all that far off from using it before I started to use it. But I do think it's worth persevering, and that's honestly why I love something like Twitter or blogging as well, is because maybe not everybody in your current school is doing it, maybe not every teacher you talk to is doing it, but there are other teachers out there that are. And so we can kind of learn from those teachers and learn from each other and share those experiences, even if they're not the experiences we're necessarily sharing at school. Because, I mean, everyone is at a different point, and that's okay. But, you know, some of the teachers that you're working with may have those people within their environment that they can share with, and if you're trying something different, you may not. The other thing that I think is important is that idea that we really need to learn from each other. And so that does mean learning from all those teachers who maybe are or aren't using it, but learning about how you could take those ideas and make them work for you. Because I think we all teach in different ways. And I've said it many times to many different teachers and administrators before. I mean, I don't like when somebody tells me necessarily how to do something. I wouldn't want to be the person who tells them. And so I think it's fair to really respect that we are all different. We're all learning things in different ways. We all come from a different background, but we can all learn a lot from each other. And this is kind of that nice way of doing so. So try something different, even if it's different. See how it works. You know, dialogue with other people about it. See what they suggest. Be open to getting that feedback, and find those critical friends and those other people that are out there that will help along too. And that, I mean, that's honestly why someone like my old VP was awesome, because she was someone who had a curriculum background, and so she was somebody that would be able to kind of help and give me some of that feedback when I really needed it. And it's good to have those people around. Okay, so I guess we are really kind of coming to the end. And so with that, what's something new that you learned tonight that you plan on trying? And hopefully you can share some of your ideas here.
Province again. Oops. Here we are. Thanks. Oops, sorry.
Oh, perfect. Awesome. Perfect. Well, it's so nice to see all the different things that people are using. I know it, or that they want to try. I know at the end of presentations it can always seem so overwhelming. And I often find if I don't commit to making a change, then I never end up making any. So I always kind of like hearing what people want to try, because I'm hoping that at the end that there'll be at least something that you've taken away. So it's nice to see that people seem to be taking away something here. Oh, 105 The Hive is so awesome. I would definitely talk to, I'll write his Twitter name in here, A. Forgrave. He's one of the people who helps kind of coordinate it, and he'll give you the time. It is free internet radio station that you can use with students. He manages it, so you can basically use it from him with the time. He'll help you set it up. There's an iPad app that you can use with it. There's some computer apps that you can use to run it, and it's really easy to use and allows parents to actually listen in to what you're sharing on the radio, on the internet radio station. And it's also one that other classrooms can listen in and offer feedback and stuff from as well. So it is really, it's awesome. I do try to use it as much as possible. Yeah. Perfect, thank you. Yeah. So yeah, if you want to contact Andy, he's certainly the one who can help with 105 The Hive in terms of getting you set up, or if you have questions about it, just let me know, and I'm always happy to help. Oh, awesome. Perfect. Okay. So, thanks everyone. It's so nice to see what everyone's learned and shared, and I really appreciate all the ideas here that people have shared.
I know people are still typing there, and Chantel, if you've got a question, go ahead. Sorry, Siri, I think we're talking at the same time. I'm just going to advance the slide. There you go. Go ahead, Syria. I don't think your mic's on, Siri. You want to try again? Okay, Siri's having problems with her microphone. Do you want to run over here? Sorry, I'm yelling.
No, I got it.
Oh, there it is.
I have to apologize. I was interrupting Aviva, and then when it's my turn to talk, my computer decides that it isn't my turn to talk. So, Aviva, thank you so much for sharing, once again, so many creative ideas, offering very thoughtful suggestions and creating a safe classroom environment, really to meet the needs of all students. I just found it so well thought out and organized. As a former secondary science and math teacher, I've always been in awe of the amount of thought and planning that must go into the organization of an elementary classroom. So my hat goes off to all of you. I would like to thank each of you for giving up your time to participate tonight and for sharing so many of your ideas. And I was happy to see on the whiteboard there at the end that there's quite a few ideas that you're planning to take away and use in your own classroom. That is great to see. I would like to encourage you to take a few minutes and fill in the exit survey, the link there that Louise has put at the middle of the slide. We're approaching the end of our fall program. We've got 2 more sessions this week, and then we'll have a break till the middle of January. So we are right in the middle of planning the winter and spring program. So do give us feedback. I know some of you seem to be still struggling with inquiry, so we'll probably offer more workshops in the winter-spring program. But if you tell us your specific needs, and we can see what we can do to meet those needs. Do check in with us again probably mid-December for the new calendar going up, and look for the OTS Connect email that'll go out announcing when registration is open. Use the link below to sign up for the next couple of sessions, and share it with your colleagues, because at this point you can access the recorded sessions. For example, Aviva's fabulous inquiry webinar that she did last week, and other webinars that you can check the recording of and access the resources. So thank you all, and have So good evening, Aviva. Thank you again. And have a good night. Louise, thank you for your work in keeping us connected here.
Thank you. I'm just going to jump on and let people know that I just put the link in the chat, and it's the very bottom link on the slide as well, that I was a very busy girl today. The resource page is already up and ready. The only thing that's not on it is this recording. So definitely click on that link, and you'll have all that stuff that's been talked about tonight will already all be there for you. You'll get the follow-up email as well. It's just that our email server isn't working right now, and I wanted to make sure you had that. Thanks, everyone.